And now, here's another episode of On Campus with your host, Coach Mark.
Hey there. Yes, it's Coach Mark. Another episode of On Campus coming your way, this time from the University of Michigan. Wow, what a beautiful place this is. I drove all the way up here from Pennsylvania just so I could sit down with Coach Tracy Smith and get amazing information and then share it with you. So if you're a young player or a parent and you want to know really what it takes to play at a place like Michigan, well, hey, this podcast is perfect for you. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Coach Smith, thank you for having me. It's my first trip to Michigan.
You got your jacket on.
That's all right. That's all right. Beautiful campus. Well, it's certainly great to be here and great to talk to you. You know, the purpose of doing these podcasts is really just to give great information to parents and players. And honestly, I'm gonna embarrass you here because I want to go over your resume, but I can't think of somebody more experienced and knowledgeable to give these people great information.
You could have just summed that up saying nobody's as old, right?
Old is wisdom. Old is experience.
No, and I tell you, one of the reasons why I'm excited to do this and when you reached out to talk about it is because I'm kind of at that stage in the life of having been parent, going through it, not just, being in the industry itself. And I'm sure we'll get to some of the questions, but that's where I am in my stage of life is providing information, because this is confusing even being in it, for a lifetime, but providing information to parents and kids because of having kids myself that have gone through the recruiting process in both baseball and football. So when you presented this opportunity, I've certainly welcomed the chance to sit and talk with you.
Well, I am certainly grateful, and a lot of people listening are going to be, but I'm going to embarrass you here because I went over your bio and I had to print it out. Normally I can just take a couple notes here, but I'm just going to go through this and then we're going to talk about this body of work and what it takes to be at this level, to be this successful. But, let's go all the way back. 4-year letter winner, Division I player, master's degree in sports organization, played professionally for the Chicago Cubs, mid-major coach. You led Miami to 8 consecutive 30-win seasons, Power 5 head coach, one of only 8 coaches to lead 3 different Division I schools to an NCAA tournament, 25 years of head coaching, 805 wins, Big Ten Coach of the Year, National Coach of the Year, College World Series appearance. This one really got me. Number 1 recruiting class when you were at Arizona State, 7 first-rounders, 7 Team USA players. You even coached the first pick in the draft, Spencer Torkelson, and 90 major league draft picks. I mean, if that isn't a body of work, I don't know what is. So first of all, congratulations on that. But let me put you on the spot. When you hear that, I know you're a humble guy, but I'm going to ask you to talk about that. Like what goes into that? How did you achieve that kind of a success?
When you read it, because honestly, I don't really look at it. I mean, it's, but I feel lucky, to be doing what I'm doing. And it's funny. I just had, when I was in Arizona recently, spent time with my son at lunch, and he's in the middle of his career, and in fact, we just communicated with him.
Sure.
We were talking about that, in life when you're younger. What do you aspire to be and all of that? And so when you're reading that off, I didn't set out at 30 some years old and saying at the end of the day, I want to be able to read off a list of things like this. I mean, the focus was really just taking the situation or the job or the circumstances and just trying to honestly be as good as you could be in that moment, because then other things present themselves. That's really it. It was never this, hey, I want to be a Division I coach or the Power 5. I can honestly sit here, that was not the plan.
That's interesting because you hear so much about goal setting and planning so far out ahead, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but the more I learn about success, like people, like you sort of win the day, more than...
I'm always conflicted. I mean, I think about that a lot too, because I'll get intimidated or think, boy, I'm doing this the wrong way, when a lot of successful people are like, I put down my goals in life when I was whatever, and I checked them. I'm not that way, and never have been. I'm more about win the day, keep both feet in today. I would tell my kids, I said, where's the coolest place on the earth, and as they're growing up, because I wanted to instill the same. I'm like, it's where you're standing right now, and make it that. And I just think if you do those types of things, other stuff will present themselves, and then you have to make a decision. Do I want to stay in this, or do I want to challenge myself and take another step? And so I'm a big believer in just focusing on the here and now.
So as a coach, is that how you coach players as well?
Totally. And you know this. I mean, having, you've been around it a little bit, and you've had to experience the same thing. I think one of the things that we have to deal with, and most college coaches understand, is that draft year, and how that impacts, because you'll see an athlete will be good as a freshman and really good as a sophomore, and then all of a sudden they have this really down year as the junior. And so what's the variable? Well, the variable is, I need to do this so that I can get here. No. You need to just be good today, and then all that other stuff will take care of itself. So,
I know. I mean, it's the same for these young players, and we're going to talk about the recruiting process here later in the show. But I mean, I see it at the travel ball level. These kids start getting a little recruitment going, and they're looking up in the stands to see who's there, and pretty soon they're tanking. Yeah.
Well, and I remember you mentioned Torkelson, and you could say he was arguably the best amateur player on the planet the one year, and it was the same deal. Like his sophomore year, he comes off of, he's hit 25 home runs, break Barry Bonds' record and whatever, and he's struggling, or so the media thought. Struggling, he was hitting like 380 at the time. But, one of the things we said was, hey, create your focus, like try and be really good today, because he was feeling that pressure, to live up to all that. And it's like, hey man, just be good today at practice, and you know what? Focus on somebody else and make them good and bring them along with you. And guess what will happen? You won't think about yourself and all the things, and your performance will go up. And it's exactly, so yes, I do coach that way, and I truly, truly believe in that. Yeah,
for sure. But I think, I'm not sure how you teach that to young players, because they think this game is so important because so-and-so's here. And then they think, I went 0 for 5, it's over. And I see them putting so much pressure, and I see parents putting a lot of pressure.
I talk to parents all the time about, you can't force the process,
right?
And the process being the recruiting process, because college coaches are in the business, of winning.
Yeah.
And they're not in the business of doing favors. So the winning is going to come on your child being a really good person, because that starts with that, with a great work ethic, and they got to have talent. And when you blend those things, and you throw in the academic, but you can't force that. That is what it is. You can work on it and develop it. But I hear all the time, well, my son needs to be playing for this coach, or my high school coach isn't doing enough for him, and whatever. I'm like, that's not their job.
Right.
And your job is to give your kid the resources to do that. But at the end of the day, he's going to have to do it. You can't force it.
That's right. Well, there's another subject I wanted to talk about today, because to have a career like you've had, and we're going to talk about adversity. If you're listening to this, at the end of this podcast today, we're going to talk about overcoming adversity, which personally is one of my favorites, because this journey, whether it's through your journey or a player's journey. My sons both had horrific injuries, all kinds of stuff. We're going to get to that. But I want to talk about the word fun, because I used to say there must be a baseball gene that we could have this much fun in this game of baseball. But can you touch on your attitude on fun?
Well, my philosophy of my job and my career is, I always say this. In fact, I was just telling somebody the other day, I said, I take my job seriously, but I don't take myself too seriously. So, are there moments when you've got to crank it up and you got to dial it in? Of course there are. But in our sport in particular, baseball, there's a lot of downtime in what you do. But if life isn't fun, if work isn't fun, if living isn't fun, what are we doing? we're only here a short amount of time. Right. And, and you could talk about that in life, or you can, get that down to a micro level if you can talk about your athletic career. If you're sitting here chasing this thing, and that is your sole focus, whether it be a scholarship or a Division I opportunity, or I want to be the next coach at whatever, you're missing all of the good stuff that happens on a daily basis. So true. So that's where I just get back to we should be having fun in what we're doing. And then if you're doing that and you're doing it over and over again, I guarantee you, if you got talented kids and whatever, you're going to have some success in that, or you're a talented kid, you're going to have success. Then the other things will present themselves organically. You're not going to have to force the process.
Right. Well, I mean, all the success you've had as a coach, I always pay attention to the players. Do they look like they're having fun when they're out there playing, or do they look super uptight? And usually that's either coming from their parents or their coaches. So I notice your players look like they're having fun. I mean, they're college kids. Now, I know the college game's changing a lot. We're going to talk about that. But they're still college kids. And, as an old guy watching them, you want to see them having fun.
Well,
this is a special moment in their life.
And that's the best part of, honestly, of what I do, my profession.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I say I'm still lucky, and everybody's like, hey, how long are you going to do this? I'm like, as long as I'm still having fun.
Yeah.
And has that required over the years? I was a head coach at age 30. Am I the same person at age 30 as I am now? Probably not. Well, I'd say probably not. I'm not. You have to evolve because it is their world now. And you have to adapt. You have to make adjustments on your side of it from a managing standpoint of how you manage people. And I saw something in one program recently that banned all cell phones and things, and I'll let that be nameless. But I looked at that and I said, I'm looking at it as is that something I want to fight in today's world? Right. I get it, maybe 10, 15 years when everyone was still, but these things are a part of it might as well be a body part. So,
well, where I notice it? In just the vocabulary. I mean, again, not to sound like the old guy here, but I got my years on me too. And I want to stay relevant too. I mean, we all do. I never thought about it until I got to this age. I want to be relevant. And I'm like, I got to stay up with some of these slang terms that I don't know.
And music and songs and dances and you name it. Right?
Yeah. Well, you obviously are doing it at an incredible high level. I want to switch gears for a minute, and I want to actually transition into talking about these young players, these young parents. We've touched on a couple of them, but I want to ask the question, what's important for them? Let's talk a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old. They know what they want. I ask them questions. How many of you want to play Division I baseball? They all raise their hands. Michigan, they have their sights set high. So I get that. But I think they're focusing on a lot of things that aren't important, especially parents. So if you could maybe share some thoughts, what do you think they should be focused on at those young ages?
Well, I'm a big, people matter. I'm a big, whatever the environment is, whether it's sport, youth sport, adult sport, business, whatever, people matter. So to me, I would want my kids to be around good people, right, first and foremost. And when I say good people, I'm just talking about people that are going to make them better when the uniform's on or off. Right. And that's, to me, it starts there. And then,
can I interrupt you? Let's talk about what some of those things are that good people do with young people.
I think honestly, to me, it's life messages. And, I think sports certainly transcends life. So when you can capture those moments in sport or in a game or in whatever that also are life lessons, and you can convey that to young people, happened this weekend. I said, this is when we have a tough loss or we have a good thing or whatever, I always try to tie it into this is also life. This is how these things happen in life. And so that, I think, being able to convey and teach life messages, around good people too, just, modeling, good behavior, what type of attitude, what type of, when you go into a dugout, when you leave, is it cleaner than when you left? Just all of those types of things that are life lessons as well. So and I ran a travel program. Mm-hmm. We played against a lot of programs that I'm not here to knock programs, but I didn't see a lot of the life lessons because they were pretty focused on just winning, putting the best players out there winning. They're not getting really paid to win like you guys are. So I always wonder, why is there such a focus on that? And the kids are dropping F-bombs. The
kids are kicking buckets. The kids are, mommy's bringing Johnny drinks. You know, there were all these things going on. I'm like, this is not preparing
life.
kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we try to talk about that. We talk about it, but we talk about it all the time about, hey, you're going to get a great baseball experience here at Michigan. You're going to get, you know, the knowledge, whatever. But where we will fail you is if we don't, when that uniform comes off, because no matter how good you are, you still have to be a productive member of our society. So a big part of our mission here is making sure that we're setting you up for life after baseball. And people think that's corny and you just say it, but it is the truth.
Absolutely.
It's the truth.
Well, one of the things that I always talk to these young players and their parents about is when you get to your level, first of all, it's like having 2 full-time jobs.
Totally.
So time management, we could do a whole podcast on just that. But I want to talk about some of the things that you hold your players accountable to. And then we'll apply that to the travel baseball world, because I want these people to understand you're either preparing for guys like you or you're going to get shell-shocked if you even get an opportunity to get there.
I could talk for days on this stuff, but we're big on, even with my own sons who are all 3 Division I athletes, you know, my youngest said, I want to be a Division I quarterback. And I'm like, all right, well, make sure your actions match your words. And so for me, it has to become a lifestyle. At the level, if you're talking about at this level, it has to become a lifestyle, and certainly beyond. And what do I mean by that? I mean, to me, we talk about in our program, if you're going to college, there's 3 areas. There's your academic, your athletic, and your social. All of those are important. You know, I don't want a kid to come here and be a hermit and not experience everything that's presented to him at the University of Michigan. But when that social piece becomes too big, then some of those other things are probably going to suffer. So I say this all the time, we signed up for this, meaning if you signed on to be a baseball player at the University of Michigan, you didn't sign on to be normal. You know, you've signed on to do things above and beyond what the normal student does. So it needs to be a lifestyle. And that's what we look for. And I also, in the recruiting process, very much will dive into when the parents are sitting there with the kids, like, okay, I understand all this stuff with, Johnny here. What's the message from home? That's what I want to know, is like, because this isn't going to be easy. There's going to be times that he's going to call and be like, Coach Smith's getting on me today and whatever. Well, I'm getting on you because I want you to be the best you can be. But so when I do that to your son, what are you going to be telling him? Hey, you know what? You're getting screwed over. You know, let's get in the portal and get out of there. Or are you saying, hey, let's listen to the message and let's dig in and get better. And so we're real big on that. It's like working together of like, what's the message for home? Because I do believe it takes a village in today's world to produce a successful Division I athlete. All
right. So we're talking about a subject that I love, which is life as a college student, a Division I athlete. And I'm always talking to parents and players about preparing them for you. And let's talk about a couple of very specific things. Let's just talk. I'm gonna put you on the spot. A kid shows up. Well, first of all, you guys have a gazillion meetings, right? At your level with players.
Early on, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Kid shows up late. What's that feel like to you, or what when a kid doesn't?
You mean like physically shows up late?
Yeah, he has a meeting with you at 8:00 and walks in at 8:10.
Meeting's probably over.
Okay.
Well, and I'm big on, and this is the truth, like anyone that's involved in our program, we talk about whether it's the academics or coaches or weight coach, whatever, you respect other people's time.
Okay. Yeah.
Because everybody's time is valuable. And when someone's late, I think you're making a statement of what you think of their time. And so if we have a meeting, for example, in this room, that it's at 8. And I'll just say this, I'm not the old school guy that says, okay, 8:00 meeting, you're late if you're not there by 7:45. I'm not that guy. I'm like, if I set an 8:00 meeting, it's going to start at 8.
Yeah.
So that I don't play games like that, but if then you're just not in, like we close the door and you're not in. And I think it's pretty simple.
See, I love that. And it's common across sports at your level, accountability. Show up late for an interview. So again, we tie that in, and I'll say that. It'll be situations like that. I say, you know what you just did? We'll talk about it later. I said, you know what you just did? Right now, maybe I suspend you, or when I do something, whatever. But in the real world, you get fired.
So you better figure these things out. You better figure these things out now, and it's a pretty easy thing to do.
What about body language?
That's my big one.
So a kid comes in. I'm just gonna have a little fun with this. Kid comes in. You have to have a meeting with him. And he's doing one of these numbers, and he's not looking at you, and he's kind of doing this as a leader with an amazing resume. What are you saying to that kid?
It's a statement. Those are very controllable things, and that's when I do my pre-yearly meeting, and I have a whole section on body language, and about how body language is so important. I said, my players won't, but there's certain things that won't get me going and certain things that will really get me going, and one of them is the body language piece, because it's a very easy thing to control, and it's a major sign of respect or disrespect, but it's both ways. Right. It's not just that it's not a dictatorship and you got to bow down to the overall leader, but I think it's a very simple thing to control. So, a funny story, Josh Fagley, who's on my staff, former big leaguer, whatever, when I was recruiting him at Indiana, I'll never forget, I visited 2 student athletes. He lived in Terre Haute, and I go to the other kid, and this kid ended up playing professional baseball. But anyway, I go into the house, meeting with him, same deal, sitting there. I drive there with my assistant. We're sitting around the kitchen table. The kid's playing with the dog, not paying attention, whatever. And it went on for like 20 minutes or so. But I get out in the car in the driveway, and I said to my assistant, I go, I was like, I don't want that kid. Because of this, that, and the other. So I go to Fagley's house, the next one we go to, and I was probably still heated from that. And I'm kind of taking it out on him, like, I'm sick and tired, And so we actually joked about that a couple of weeks ago, but that's a big one.
Well, I always think about, and I hear stories like that, and I just don't know if parents understand what that really means. That means that all the lessons, all the travel baseball they did, all the money they spent was just thrown out the window because the kid can't pay attention in a meeting at his own home. The dog's more important, and he just lost a scholarship up. So I want to just touch on this for parents, because, they're on the front lines too here. They're the ones, I hate to say it, sometimes contributing or enabling some of these things. Parents talking for players. How about that one?
I was just going to say that before you mentioned that. I was going to bring that. The big one for me too is if I'm asking your son a question, I want to hear your son answer.
Right.
And again, I'm a parent of kids, and sometimes our kids stumble, but that is important to the whole process. Allow your kid to articulate his response. And there have been numerous times where I've had to say, okay, I want to hear from him.
It's embarrassing.
I was going to say, it's uncomfortable kind of a moment, but you're like, okay, I get it, please, but I want to hear from him. And then they're like, oh, I'm sorry. So that happens a lot.
Well, as a parent, I can relate. My son Christian was in 9th grade. We went down to ECU on a visit back in the day when you could do that. Billy Godwin was the head coach. And we're sitting in the parking lot, and I said to Christian, now Christian, we're going to go in there. You're going to be talking to a grown man. And he's going to ask you questions. I don't know what he's going to ask you, but I'm not answering the question for you. I said, even if you struggle, I'm not rescuing you. You understand? And he's like, yeah. We go in. He was a quiet kid. And I'm like, I'm watching this new kid.
And you're like, is that my son?
Yeah. And Billy Godwin, I'll never forget it, after the meeting, walks up to me and he goes, that might be one of the first meetings I've ever had with a parent and a player where the parent didn't answer the questions. He recognized that. And then, of course,
I'll tell you, most coaches do. We always say, and not just, I'm saying within Michigan, like coaches, we all talk about that.
Yeah.
It's like how funny, and then everyone will try to one up a story of someone.
Well, there's so many of them, but you know what it is? It's the parents' fear that their kid can't do it, and they're going to rescue them. And just think about that from a parenting style. Every time my kid's going to stumble, what do? I come running in to rescue him, which is probably the worst thing you can do. It
goes back to that message from home.
Yeah.
Part of the and I said earlier that that I think it takes a village, and there are coaches, and again, I'm not saying they're wrong, that will say, hey, when you drop your son off, I'm never going to communicate with you again. Like we don't do it that way. Yeah. Like if there are issues that need to be that we need to bring the parents in, because we need to work together, because it's not just the baseball piece, it's the overall success of this individual at your school and beyond. And so there'll be times when I'll pick up the phone and call and say, hey, here's what's happening. Here, and I'm going to take some measures here or whatever that are going to correct this behavior, but I need to know that you're supporting this message from home, because here's why we're doing it. And, sometimes they get it and sometimes they don't.
Right. Well, I know we're going to talk about recruiting, but when you're recruiting a player, you're recruiting a family. Mm-hmm. And you're probably paying attention to that relationship, because I've had college coaches tell me they don't recruit a kid because of the parents.
That's happened.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. I mean, and again, I'm a parent of kids myself, and we love our kids and whatever, but there has to be, they're the one that's going to be living it. And that's what I would even say on when people comment, and I get it all the time, if kid's not playing, I don't like talking about playing time with people, but, he just needs his chance. Well, no. His chance comes every single day, every day, and how he's performing academically, how he's performing in the weight room, how he shows up on time, how he sits in my office, how he sits in the front row. All of those things are taken into account because the margin of error, or the difference between a guy playing and not playing, is probably not that big when you get to this level.
Right.
So if I'm sitting here and I've got, say, a midweek game, and I'm going to give a young guy that's maybe not starting an opportunity to play, and I got two guys to choose from, okay, and they're both pretty equal, well, then it comes down to, hey, man, who's really engaging in practice? Who's doing this and that? And, whose parents not wearing it? I mean, those things matter. They really do.
I had a college coach one time tell me he loved one of our players because of the parents. And I'll make this story short, but he was sitting beside the parents. They didn't know who he was. And the kid was having a lousy game. And the dad was just sitting there watching the game.
Well, I would say this is an important message, and I say this all the time to parents. Like, it doesn't do any good, because we'll get the ones that'll sit in the view of the parent, if he strikes out or whatever, they got to make sure he sees him. I said, parents, please do not project your nervousness onto your kid, because guess what? You're putting that into their game. Right. And I actually said that, like, this year, I said, when we have our official visit weekend, I'm going to make a point to talk about that more, because I'm seeing it more now with parents that'll just kill and beat their kids up. And I want to say, hey, you sent them to us. When you come, how about go buy some popcorn, go sit down and support the University of Michigan and your son playing. Yeah. Like, stop coaching, stop writing them on every... Because that's not baseball.
Well, what blows me away is, I see it all the time in travel baseball, but the thought that anybody would be still doing that at your level.
Well, you're right. But it's more. It is more. It is more now. And I've had in the past where, I'll call the kid in and say, look, like, and whether it's just the negativity or I'll say, look, I can't discipline your parent, but what your parent is doing is they're hurting the program and they're hurting you. I said, so you need to go back and talk to your parents, say, knock it off, because I can't discipline you.
Yeah. And I've done that running a travel program. Yeah. I said, I hate to do this, but there's just things that I got to take action on, and like you said, I can't discipline your parents. How about? Again, we're easing our way in now to travel baseball and some of the good, the bad, and the ugly of travel baseball. Parents bringing drinks and stuff to their kids during the game and carrying their bags and things like that. As a coach, is that a red flag for you?
Yeah, yes and no. I'd prefer not to see it. There are certain behaviors that I think that can be corrected once you get it. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm looking at, but those things, you don't want to see that, because that's not life. Again, those are little life lessons that are pretty easy to teach. But I'll look at things like, okay, if mom's bringing them a Gatorade over the thing or whatever, I can stop that when I get them. I don't like seeing it, and I know exactly what you're talking about because I see it all the time. I'll be walking into events, and mom and dad are lugging all the bat bags, and little Johnny's eating a candy bar. And it is. And I'm like, what are we doing here? But is that correctable? Yeah. Those would certainly be things that you would talk about in the recruitment process if it got to that point, is, hey, making it clear. Yeah. That isn't going to happen here. And it's not because you're trying to be mean. It's just, again, that's not reality in the real world. It's not.
I just don't think it's a good habit at any
No.
early on. Whether these kids are going to play at your level or not, they need to learn to be independent.
Totally.
And a lot of these parents are really not fostering those skills. And I'm not here to knock all parents. There's people doing a great job.
Well, I would say this, and I think there's this misconception of the parental influence of what they think they can control. That goes back to what I said. You can't force this.
Right.
Like, you're not going to get me to recruit your kid simply because you do X, Y, and Z. You know what's going to make me recruit your kid? Is that A, he's a good ball player, and then once we peel the onion back, he's a good kid and a good student, whatever. Right. It's that simple.
Right.
It's not you force feeding him down, or it doesn't work like that. And so many people think that they can dictate the outcome of the recruiting process.
Well, they do. Even in travel baseball,
I know.
people
I see
thought
it.
I was bribed one time. Literally, a guy wanted to write me a check so his son made our team. True story. I want to talk about a subject that a lot of people really, I don't think, understand, and that's this concept of being a great teammate. Because when you're out watching these kids and recruiting them and scouting, you guys talk a lot about, man, he's a really good teammate. I know you guys would come up to me and when I was coaching and you say, what kind of teammate is he? Mm-hmm. So talk to me, what does that even mean?
Well, to me, it means, that you're selfless in the overall good of the team. And so back to just had this conversation, it just came from a head coaches meeting. We were talking about rosters and who travels and who dresses and all of those things. And because I don't like a big roster, I'm a stickler on you'll get what you earn in the program. And again, not being in a negative way, but you're going to have to earn it. And so whether it's travel or dressing at home or whatever, it isn't just about playing really well on the field and hitting the 400-some foot home run or striking 10 guys out. It's also, can you contribute to winning even if you're not playing? Are you supportive of the guy that may be playing in place of you? And it's very personal for me. You mentioned, and I tell the story to the kids all the time, when I was playing with the Cubs, and I was a minor league, kind of backup guy, whatever, and I'll leave the guy nameless, but I was not a regular player. And our superstar second, third round pick, who I took ground balls with every single day, and I'm encouraging him and whatever, and just having a good time. Well, he had struck out 9 or 10 times in a row, so the call comes down from the front office, hey, we need to sit him a game or something like that. And so they insert the old scrub Tracy Smith into play. And I'll never forget that. Here I am, 58 years old, and I still remember this vividly, that they post a lineup and whatever, and then batting practice that day when we're normally taking ground balls, and I'm here encouraging him, and I'm not starting. He's playing ahead of me. And on the one game, I'm not going to take his job.
Right. But
the one game, he's sitting up on a field or up on a hill pouting.
Oh my gosh.
And that has stuck out. And I make that message very clear to my guys. Like, man, you encourage your teammates, because there's going to be a time when you're playing or vice versa, that you're going to want that encouragement. So that's what it means to me, is be supportive of the overall mission of the group, period.
Where you see these young kids, like you watch the Little League World Series or something, and the pitcher's on the mound, and he's the star pitcher, and the shortstop boots one, and he's giving them dude, how did you not make that play? And,
it's a body language thing again.
Yeah, that bothers me. And we talked about communication like in an interview or something, but you bring up another point, body language even on the field.
Totly.
Talk to me about what that
It's a big one. This game is built on failure. I mean, it's built on, a lot of different parts moving, and there's going to be, success, great plays sometime, and, bad things happen. You got to be able to, and in pro ball, they make a bigger deal out of it that, like, don't show up your teammates in a negative way. But I think that certainly trickles down. Bad stuff's going to happen. So, the negative body language for me, going back to when I said it earlier, that stuff sets me out, sets me off more of, and we talk again about why would you give the opposition any inkling that they got to you?
Right.
The guy that scares me, and I say this all the time, the guy that scares me, and it's a bad example, but if you're going to fight somebody, and you give them their best shot or whatever, and he's, all right, here I come. That guy would intimidate me. Same thing. You give up a home run, give me the ball back, I'm centered, ready to pitch again. That guy scares me. The guy that's drooping around or whatever in our dugout, it's like, oh, we got to him.
See, this is such a golden point. From a recruiting standpoint, you're watching kids out there, and I want people to hear this so loud and clear. You watch a kid give up a home run. You don't care that he gave up a home run. You care what he acts like after.
I'll tell you that sometimes this is the truth. Because the guys you're recruiting are normally really good at their level and they're dominating. So that's easy.
Yeah.
That's really easy.
Yeah.
There are times you want to see them go through the adversity and the failure in the game so you can see how they respond. That's going to give you a better insight into the guy that's striking out 15. And because guess what? He's not going to strike out 15 every time at each level he moves up. So let's get a glimpse at what he looks like when things aren't going so well.
Such an important part, because so many people think you guys are so focused on results, and when you don't see the results, you're not interested, and it couldn't be further from the truth.
I tell a story. I go to see one kid play, and I'm in Indiana, I think, at the time, and I go to see a kid. Well, there's another kid on the other team that I didn't know who it was, whatever, but he strikes out 3 times in the game. Strikes out 3 times. But I liked what I saw and how he played and whatever. I ended up recruiting that guy as opposed to the guy I was coming to see. And he ended up having a great career. Actually, it was in Miami. Has a great career at Miami and goes on, he makes it to AA or something like that. But he struck out 3 times. So
we couldn't have this conversation without talking about the transfer portal. And, probably most of the people listening to this understand what it is or have some knowledge, but let's not even assume they do. Would you mind just what is the transfer portal before we get into it?
So, baseball, the evolution, I've been around long enough that kids could when I first started coaching, they could transfer without penalty. And then the NCAA put in certain legislation in the idea of parity that they would make a student athlete sit or put in a year of residency if they transferred to another Division I institution. Now the NCAA portal essentially is it's basically free agency if a kid wants to do it. So if a young man in our sport, enters the portal, he has the opportunity, and there's certain times you can enter it, certain times you can't, but he can enter it and he can explore the interest in transfer without serving a year of residency if in the event he meets certain, academic requirements or whatever. The other side of that, though, if they're on scholarship, the protection for the institution, if they're on scholarship, they enter the portal. The institution then can take their scholarship after, I can't remember how many days it is, maybe 10 days, but they can. So there's a give and take with it. But essentially, it allows the student athlete, if he's not happy or he wants to seek opportunities elsewhere, he can do it without the permission of the coach or release from the university. Okay,
great explanation. Now, more importantly, how it has impacted the game.
I can talk. I think there's different ways of talking about this, because I've always prided myself on being a so what, let's figure it out type person. So I'm gonna start with that. Is like the portal is what it is. It's a rule. We're going to deal with it. We'll find a way to be successful with it. What I don't like about the portal is maybe a little bit of what I touched earlier about life. Life's not always, let's just say that I'm working for company Z and my boss is not the best and whatever. And yes, I could leave that company, but you got to sometimes figure out how to make situations work. It's not going to be that easy just to jump ship. And so I don't like that it's made it too easy for an athlete not to maybe learn some of that stuff of digging in and figuring out how to make situations work. And I will tell you, it makes coaches, and I've talked to colleagues and I feel it myself, and I had a conversation as recently as this week. It's like, it makes you frame your conversations differently. And I don't think it's to the benefit of the kid. Whereas maybe I'm wrong, but I got a guy I got to be sensitive to how I talk to them.
Because if you tick them off or they don't like that tone,
the tone, and I think I've got a pretty decent track record of, you stay and you do things like it's going to work out for you, and we frame it that way. But yes, if you say something as, it could be minimal, they boom and gone, and you put all that time in developing this individual. But again, I don't want to sit here and complain about it. It's a reality that we're dealing with. I don't like it for that reason. But the flip side, and I'll say this, is the cautionary tale for people to think, we got them by the. No, it's the grass isn't always greener, because that's what I'll say if someone's going to go. Like, if you think it's any different at another Power 5 in the professionalism and the expectations, all that, you're kidding yourself.
True.
Grass isn't always greener.
I get nervous when I hear kids always talking about what they like, because life isn't always about what you like. You go somewhere, and if you have an expectation to like every single facet about it, and then you don't, and you go somewhere else, you find out, wow, there's things here I don't like too.
Right.
And
isn't that life again?
Yeah, it is life. Now let me flip this again to what this means to high school players, because the people listening, these young players, in my opinion, are really affected by the transfer portal, because it used to be when you were looking at the recruiting pool, you might have been looking at some JUCO kids, one or two come in, but the majority of them are high school. Now, you guys are looking at a whole new pool of kids. Like, how many are in the transfer portal? How many kids? Thousands of college kids, a lot of them actually proven college kids, right?
That's it.
Yeah. So now you got a high school kid, a college kid. I'm paid to win.
Paradigm shift in recruiting.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, we're the same. Like, you don't have to, as a college coach, you don't have to make that early, you know what, I think he's going to be something, and then pull the trigger on that in a commitment or whatever. Whereas the portal does allow you to look at someone with a track record. And so the families and the kids, don't be discouraged. And I say this as well, like, don't be discouraged if you don't get that Division I opportunity right out of high school. Go, if you wanted to, go to a D2, D3 school and ball out. You will have, I'm telling you, you'll have opportunities on the D1 side coming out of there. And with NIL nowadays, maybe even more. So it's not a death sentence if you get closed out of high school. I'm not going to sit here and say that the experience isn't different from D1 to D2. No, I'm not saying that. Yeah. But from a baseball thing, your career's not over. Because my philosophy on the portal is, like, from a recruiting standpoint at Michigan, is we're not going to go and we're not looking at somebody else's cast off that didn't have success or ran from a challenge. Like, I would prefer to look at the portal for a successful D2, D3, because the word there is the operative word, successful.
Successful, right.
And so I would say that it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, and this is another thing people don't realize, and sort of like the elephant in the room. You guys at this level, as a coach, you're paid to win. I mean, that is unlike travel baseball and maybe high school baseball, where there's not big bucks. You guys, college coaching has changed. Guys are making big bucks now, and their job. And I had this experience firsthand with my own son, where a coach said, "Look, I'm paid to win, so I have to make tough decisions." And I'll tell you what, if you're a kid that somehow gets there, but you're not really ready, you got a short career.
And I always laugh. Not laugh. I laugh. Yeah. When you'll hear that. Well, you're playing favorites, or I'm like, it doesn't even make sense logically what you're saying, because my livelihood depends on, I love my house, I love my car, I love where I live, I love everything. I'm not in the business of doing favors. I can't be.
Right.
So for you to say that, and it goes back to that, that reflection and self-awareness of people, like, don't even, like, but that's easy to do when things aren't going bad. What's the tendency of people? It's somebody else's as opposed to mine.
Right.
My fault. So no, the portal, it's not going away.
Right.
I mean, I think the legislation, everything's going to be, but it has changed. But that's fine. Like, I go back to, I like to solve problems. So if this is the world we're living in, let's figure out a way that it's going to work and make it work for our program and our institution.
So everybody is in that boat. I hate to say it like this, but I feel like parents and players, high school players, are the last or the most naive right now of how impactful. You guys are making the adjustments. It is what it is. I get that. But here's where I think they're making the mistake. They might still think, many of them, that they can be okay going through the process and they're going to get on to the next level, whereas there is no really long-term development anymore. I mean, wouldn't you agree that a freshman's got to come in and contribute pretty quickly?
Depending on where you are, I think, but when we were talking about this, it kind of got me back to I think this is uber important, and this should be when we were talking about, we opened this podcast talking about, what's the focus? The focus should be on enjoying that process and having fun every day and being a part of a group and all the good things, because things can change, so darn quickly. So as you're going through this recruiting process and you're trying to force that process, there are these factors that are outside of your control. So why not enjoy the moment?
Right.
Because you're missing so much if you don't. And if you do that, it's probably going to work out anyway.
Yeah. And as a parent, you went through it with your kids. I went through it with my kids. I can look back. I mean, there were probably a few asterisks to this, but overall it was a great experience. It was fun. I enjoyed it. We have fond memories, but I will tell you, there are parents that look back with huge regrets. They're looking back on, man, I put way too much pressure on Johnny. Yeah. I didn't enjoy the moment. So I know we maybe have digressed back to that, but that's such an important point that I want to bring up. I want to transition. You've had an amazing career coaching. You've been at the mid-major level. You've been at Arizona State. You're at Michigan now. Let's just talk about Michigan. I mean, you've made the transition up here. You took on a program that has enormous potential. But tell us a little bit about your vision.
Well, I mean, I was at a point in my life too. And I'm sure we'll get to the ASU where I had a good career, and could sit back and be like, you know what, I'm good. I got the grandkids now and do whatever. But I still had this, like, I have not won a national championship. And that for me was like my personal burning fire. Is like, because when the things happened at ASU and, getting some feelers on some other jobs, I was very like, I'm not one of those guys that like, I've got to die on a baseball field. Like, I love baseball. I love what I'm doing. I love coaching. But I'm also got a lot of other interests. But I'm like, if I get back into it, it has to be somewhere that could support a real opportunity to win a national championship. So when the Michigan thing came, I was like, check. This is another really important point I always tell parents and players. When you're looking at kids with that goal, that's your career goal. You're looking at them like, can this kid help me get to Omaha? Boom. And that's the kicker. Because as we're going through the recruiting process, we're trying to figure out, and I'll say this, on the development side and their personal goals, big part of what we do. I mean, I think it's a big responsibility of us is to prolong and extend them and prepare them for a career if that's what they want to do in professional baseball. You're going to get that. I want to hear somewhere in that messaging and somewhere in that process that you also want to come and be a part of a championship team for this unbelievable university.
Yeah.
And we'll listen for, and that'll come out in different ways. Or it won't, which then it's all about that person, their development and not. So we'll talk about that. Like, hey, we're going to develop you and we're going to do all that and help you along your journey. And it's a win-win when we're helping each other in the journey. And what a great experience it'd be to play, and be relevant on the national scene and ultimate national champion.
Well, and we haven't talked about it yet, but, competitiveness, you're looking for a kid here at Michigan that has a burning desire to get to Omaha. Like he wants to win every game and get to Omaha. But he's 14 years old right now, and he's playing on his travel team. You want to see him have the burning desire to win the championship and wherever he's playing.
And be as good, because they don't understand yet. I always tell that to people, like, Johnny, he's the hardest worker you ever have. I'm like, no. I've got a 35, well, 40 now. I got 40 Johnnies on my team. Yeah. So no, he's not.
Yeah.
They don't even know yet. You think you've worked hard, or you think you understand what it takes, but you don't. Not at our level. But yes, we're looking for those same qualities at a scaled down version of, and I always say that to guys, like, don't worry about Michigan right now. Go help your team win a state championship. Go help your travel ball team win that tournament. Go be a good teammate, man. Go be as good today as you can be. Right. And then the rest of the stuff will take care of itself.
Well, I have a buddy that has a very decorated career in special forces, and he's always talking about the same things we're talking about. And he used to say, just think about this concept. You get to pick a couple guys to go somewhere where your life's on the line. Who are you going to pick?
Right.
You're going to pick the toughest, meanest, most disciplined winners that you can find. Because if you pick average guys, you're getting killed. That's how he talks about it.
We do the same. I mean, we sit in a coach, and that's, parents should know this. Yeah. Like, I was joking around with my players in the line the other day, and they how they like to imitate, their coach and, make fun of and talk crap about him. And I was laughing. I go, well, hey, man. And they're like, what do you, I go, no, man, do it all you want. I said, don't think I don't sit around talking about you with the coaches. We were laughing. They go, well played, Skip. But no, we talk about that as like, and, after a tough loss or after something, you're like, but would you really go, to a battle with that dude or in a fight with that? So you are picking those types of qualities. And the goal in this thing is to have a locker room full of those guys. Yeah, exactly. It really is. Yeah, you have to. I mean, the teams that get there, every year I watch a College World Series, and I mean, those teams have some special. And I'm sure you've seen this, and you may have been a part of this. They have some adversity. We're going to finish our podcast talking about adversity, but I'm always amazed how those teams. You'll hear something like, "Yeah, they started the season, 500." Like yeah. But what got them through it? Toughness. Let's not miss this one. Toughness. What is your version? Because I hear college coaches talking about, I'm looking for tough kids. How would you describe a tough? The tough kid isn't the one that strikes out and throws his bat to show everybody he's mad. It's not the toughness is the one that can wants to be in the batter's box when the game's on the line, wants the baseball when the game's on the line, maybe won't succeed, in that, but doesn't change him then as a player moving forward. That to me is the toughness. It goes back to what I said earlier. It's the guy that can kind of stay like this. That's the one that scares me. And it keeps giving you the best effort every single time because you're like, gosh darn it, man, we just did this, and this off that starter, but yet he's still out there and he got a big punch out in the fourth. And that's toughness to me. The stuff that's penetrated our game now, and we had I don't want to call it a kid, but we had in a game recently. Kid got a big strikeout against us, in an inning, and he's out there, doing all his antics and whatever, and he goes back out, and we're in a real tight ball game, and Fagley and I were talking. He goes, "Watch, man, we're going to get in this inning because of that. Like right. You just stay here." Yeah, and we did get him too. Yeah, so when you get too high and too low, it's a roller coaster. But you're right. But that toughness to me is the being able to handle the highs and the lows and just and keep going and not have to display everything for the world. Right. Of that to me is fake toughness. It's that pseudo tough stuff, and I'm just not a fan of that. Exactly. When you're watching these kids play, when you're out recruiting, I mean, you had the number one recruiting class in the country at Arizona. Now I know a lot of people. I don't want them to miss this talent. You're looking for. Oh yeah, starts with talent, God-given ability, but. The old saying, talent will only get you so far. Beyond that, you're looking for kids with that level of talent, with the moxie, with the tenacity. And you can tell how if they have that when can you comment on when you're watching? We're like kids? Winners. Yeah. Like I say to my guys, it's like, okay, you go out and you see say we're looking at a pitcher. Okay. What's everybody tell you when you're looking at a pitcher? Well, coach, he throws 93. Right. I'm like, okay, cool. Mm-hmm. What are his numbers? Yeah. Does he win? Yeah. Is he getting people out? I could give two whatever's about 93. I want to know, does the kid compete? Does he get people out? And those are my marching orders to my staff is like, we're in the business of winning. And we're not in the business of getting someone to arbitration. Like, we're going to get them and develop them and do whatever, and then we're going to pass them off and let the professionals do their job to get them there. But yeah, we're looking for winners and guys that love to win. And we've got a couple guys coming in that are, state champion wrestlers and this and that. So to me, multi-sport and just winners. That's what you want in your locker room. Well, I'll give you a plug here at Michigan. I've never been here to Ann Arbor, and I don't need to say it. It's an amazing facility. The whole campus, the history, the tradition. I have zero doubt that you're going to reach your goal and win a national championship here. Well, we're going to give it what did I say? We're going to give her the old college try. I can tell you that much. Fantastic. So. One of my favorite subjects to talk to you about is adversity, overcoming adversity, embracing adversity. What a concept. Because, we always say baseball is a game of failure, and it is. But I really want to get your take on overcoming adversity. And I want to start with some adversity that you had. Elephant in the room here. You were at Arizona State. Things didn't quite work out.
as planned there. So can you just touch on that experience and,
Yeah.
but more importantly, the adversity and overcoming?
Yeah. Well, so for me, again, I've always, we talked about it a little bit earlier about, you always come to those fork in the road, and whether it's your life or career or whatever, where I can choose to go this path and challenge myself a little bit more, or I can stay here, and be where I'm comfortable. And that, that presented to me in 2014 when, in Indiana, we had it rolling, and I'm born and bred in Indiana and loved it, but, ASU called, and I'm like, all right, Tracy Smith, you've done it in the Big Ten, you always take challenges, let's go do it. So, willingly did it. And I don't regret that decision at all. And in fact, every decision teaches you something. So even, and I always call it my sabbatical once I got, but I got fired. That was one of the first times in my life or career where someone said, "We don't want you anymore. You're not good enough for us." But I was the total opposite in my mind, because everything that we set out to do. So it wasn't a real tough thing for me to overcome, because I was like, we didn't fail. Like, we just disagreed on, and again, they have their own, they have their own reasons or whatever. So I don't, I do remember that transition though, when you're like, man, I've been doing this a long time and just told that we don't want you anymore and whatever. But I remember walking, the AD, he says, we're going to whatever. And I specifically just remember like, okay.
Wow.
Stood up, I stood up from the table, shook his hand and said, I literally said this. I said, I'm getting up from this table knowing that we didn't fail. Okay. That we set out, to win. And you have a different opinion of what that is. I said, but thank you for the opportunity. Shook the hand and walked out. And the football coaches in that profession always amaze me, because those guys are getting fired and hired all the time. And I would remember counseling friends of mine who's be either fired or moving on. I said, you know what though, this is unique, because what it does is it puts you in a mindset of, I got to sharpen that pencil. Like, I got to call on every resource now and think about, okay, what my next steps are going to be. And so when that happened at Arizona State, it was no different, because I'm always like, hey man, you got to walk the walk. If you're telling people this, you got to do the same thing. And I just remembered like, okay, disappointed that we didn't agree on whatever, but I'm fine. And I'm going to be fine. And whether it's in business or, I told you, I didn't know if I wanted to coach again. I've done a lot. I was good with that. I was going to take something. So it was a pretty quick shift for me. I just did. There was that instant, I will say, because again, maybe it was just a change of life. There was that instant disappointment and like, what? But after that, it was like. So I didn't know that story, but I would say that's your inner confidence. Totally. You completely, just because somebody told you they didn't want you or they didn't think you did a good job, you didn't buy into that. No, and I'm going to tie that into even like advice for parents, because I get this a lot in recruiting, is say a kid loves to play basketball. Say he's a baseball guy. He loves to play basketball, and they're like, I'm going to quit basketball. And I'm like, well, wait, why? Well, the coach is like, he's making it. And I'm like, you can't let somebody else define your experience. And I tell him that. And that was the same thing at ASU. Like, that thing happened. He wanted to create a narrative when the factual narrative was, or not the factual narrative, the facts were this. I'm like, I can't help you. Right. So that's why it was so easy for me to get up at that table, because it goes back to the other thing we talked about having fun in life. If I've got to convince you of these things that are sitting right in front of your face, we're just not meant to be working together. Right. And there's no harm in that. Right. And so it was a fairly easy transition out for me. Well, I think of kids where you might say to a kid, "Hey, I don't see you, as a player here at Michigan." All right, does that mean he can't play somewhere else? And I say that, Mark. I say it all the time. And I'm like, and I said, I could be wrong, right? And I said, and I would love to be wrong, but I'm like, I have to make decisions based on the information I have at the time. Right. And I'll sometimes say to kids, sometimes it's just, a change of scenery because something triggers. So yeah, I'm a believer in that. And it goes back to like the confidence piece. If you really believe and you're convicted in what you do, not from a delusional standpoint, I'm not talking that, but when you can do a real self-evaluate, are there things that I would have loved to have done differently, or maybe done differently? And yeah, sure, there's some certain things, but overall, I don't regret that at all. And I look at that as just one more tool in my thing. Even when I came here, I'll never forget, like, going through the interview, they're like, hey, our it's pretty tough here, the alumni and the expectation. I go, you don't need it. I said, trust me, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing that I'm not going to experience here, that I'm going to experience here that I haven't already experienced in my, and I don't mean that in an egotistical way, but that's like, you can gain something from everything, positive or negative.
So this adversity, we talked about embracing it. And you're not a big proponent of using adversity with a chip on your shoulder. You're more of, I'm going to overcome it and be motivated all the time.
Because I'm not going to let somebody else describe, and again, the Arizona State thing is probably my biggest example in life. And it's just funny, like there could be a whole segment that said, oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, or whatever. But then there's a whole other side of, oh, yes, we did. And here's the factual, the whatever. So you can't tell me how I'm supposed to feel. Like, I feel like we did it. You disagree? Okay, shake hands, disagree. I'm going to go on and do our system and do something else. And that, you said it earlier, the confidence. I think it is that. It's like, I'm confident in myself. I'm confident in how we do things at Michigan. It's proven out over time. It just didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you certainly have the resume to be confident, and the expectations are so high here. I have no doubt you're gonna do phenomenal things here, Coach. I can't thank you enough for the time. I know how busy you are. Your schedules are nuts. So for you to take this time with us and to share this wisdom with people is just awesome.
Well, and I'll say this, and I appreciate what you're doing is invaluable. And again, take me out of it, but the others you've had on here, but the knowledge and taking the time to do that, and that's my passion in life. So I'm actually jealous and admire that you're doing this. So.
I do enjoy it, but I feel incredibly blessed to get to sit down with guys like you.
No, thank you for spending the time.
Excellent.